everybody! It's me, Carmine DeStefano, the Bookman. And after so many years of hearing comments and complaints related to the prequels and the re-releases of Star Wars, I came to a conclusion. You're not real Star Wars fans, are you? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not an insult, though people will take it as such. It's basically an observation based on some of the flimsy complaints that have come from these releases. And really, when you look at it, it's George Lucas's universe and his movies, so what's the problem, really? They're pretty much the same movies, only the prequels do everything far better than the original releases. Everything that is sci-fi related is so much better in the prequels. The backgrounds are immeasurably better, and I don't want to hear any of this bullshit CGI lament, especially nowadays when pretty much every movie, even the movies that are supposed to be practical, still have CGI up the ass. They did film on location when they could, but when you're trying to create a universe that doesn't exist, you need technology that can enhance that image or those innovations. Just Naboo alone has places the likes of which could never have been done in the original series completely. Or what about an underwater city? Or a planet city? Or all these different areas that we've never seen in the planets that we originally were on. The original saga was nothing more than drab, monochromatic backdrops with space stations. And those space stations and backdrops didn't really lend much to the technology that was supposed to be sold in this sci-fi universe. The new movies showcase that technology exemplarily with all these battle scenes that are far better than anything you've seen in the original series. I don't want to hear anybody complain again about the CGI. You see impact, speed, the likes of which were not capable of being represented in the original series. All the ground battle scenes, everything in the prequels was done better, as it should have been because it was about 20 years from the more recent movie that was released in the original series. Even the pod race, which gets so fucking slammed by so many so-called real Star Wars fans about how it's 15 minutes long and it's boring and you know what's going to happen, it really was a fun scene with all this color and all these different creatures we could never see before, some of which were puppets, making their weird noises, and oh, by the way, Sebulba, who fucking rules, and the machines themselves. It also shows Anakin Skywalker's poise under fire and how he was able to adjust. This gives you an idea as to what kind of talent he has, but it really was only 9 minutes, the extended version. 9 minutes, which means the original version released in the movies was about 7.5 to maybe 8 minutes, not 15, as opposed to the Death Star battle scene, which was slow and drab, and you knew it was going to happen. Luke was going to save the day. Granted, we didn't know that Darth Vader would show up, or that Han would show up last minute. Good job, jackass. But we knew that Luke was going to save the day anyway, and he did it, as we knew. It was repetitive, it was slow, and it was 15 minutes long. I know, I reenacted it. It's 15 minutes long. And of course, I don't have to say the special effects were better. Obviously, they have to have been. Which is again a reason why the battle scenes were faster. Hey, it's the way it is. You can't argue that point since they were faster, more up-tempo, and more colorful. There were certain times when battle scenes were almost artistic, including the lightsaber duels. I don't even know why I have to justify this. This is a no contest. You're talking about comparing a drunken bar fight to a martial arts convention. There is no comparison. How people can try to explain that the duels were better in the original series because they showed more emotional and physical impact is beyond anything I could possibly conjure up. The original series didn't have any emotional impact outside Luke looking scared or sometimes determined, because Obi-Wan looked like he was more or less ready to accept his fate, and Darth Vader had that mask, so you couldn't see what he was thinking. In the prequels, these lightsaber duels were choreographed brilliantly. They showed impact, like Obi-Wan Kenobi slicing Darth Maul in half, Qui-Gon Jinn being run through, Anakin Skywalker losing half his arm, Count Dooku losing both his hands and his head, Anakin losing both his legs and his arms, and General Grievous losing 2 hands out of 4, which people said was really stupid, but when you think about it, he wasn't a trained Jedi Knight that didn't use the Force, so you gotta come to terms with that. Whatever the case, the prequels made us realize that the Jedi Knights were not meant to be mages with laser swords. In video games and expanded universe, it's portrayed that Jedi Knights use spells like destruction spells or healing spells, turning the Force into a mystical power as opposed to an actual physical force. In fact, in Knights of the Old Republic 2, the character Freya says that Jedi Knights without their lightsabers are pretty much helpless beings. But then we see Obi-Wan Kenobi going hand-to-hand with a bounty hunter, Jango Fett, and a robotic warrior, General Grievous, and he looks pretty adequate, and he wasn't even one of the top sword duelsmen in the entire Jedi Order. Originally, the Jedi Knights were supposed to be more like samurai, and George Lucas wanted to employ the services of Toshiro Mifune, a samurai movie celebrity, to play the part of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And the name Obi-Wan Kenobi was supposed to harken back to Japanese names. Hence the term, the studio wanted Alec Guinness. But what does it matter what George Lucas wants, considering in the prequels, his dialogue was so terrible? Boy, I find it ironic that people who are Star Wars fans talk about how cheesy the dialogue in the prequels was. How can you say the dialogue for a PG and one PG-13 movie was so cheesy based on what we've gotten used to in the original series? Who the hell says blast outside the Fire Emblem universe? Who calls somebody a scruffy-looking nerf herder? Who calls somebody a big walking carpet or a big woolly oaf? Or who says he's going to turn somebody back to the good side? This is the cheesiest dialogue you've ever heard, but for whatever reason, it gets glanced over. Nobody really brings up any kind of dialogue problems in the original series, whereas in the new ones, we have dumbed-down versions of very deep, thoughtful, innovative ideas. Nothing happens by accident. Good is a point of view, Anakin. The dark side clouds everything. And what I don't understand is how people can complain that Yoda said that the dark side clouds everything, calling that lazy writing in Episode 2, but nobody has a problem with the fact that he couldn't see what was going to happen with Han and Leia in Episode 5. In fact, what Luke did really didn't help out, considering the Empire still took Han away, and Lando had to help Leia escape, not Luke. He made it worse by them having to go back and save his sorry ass. Somebody else said that the line, "only a Sith deals in absolutes," was a stupid line because it's an absolute. No, that's a fact. It's not an absolute, and it also is trying to portray that Obi-Wan Kenobi is coming to terms with the fact he's going to have to kill a young man who he helped raise as a child. And I also heard people talk about wasted scenes in the prequels. I really don't understand what wasted scenes you're talking about, but since we're on the subject, let's look at some actual wasted, useless scenes in the original series. In Episode 4, the whole Greedo-Han series where Han shot first really shouldn't have happened when you think about it, considering the Jabba the Hutt scene between him and Han Solo was supposed to take place originally. They took that scene out because it really wasn't necessary with the Greedo scene, but then again, even so, is that scene necessary considering we know that Han is gouging Luke and Obi-Wan for passage to Alderaan because of something that he says would really save his neck? And what about the whole garbage chute scene? Was that necessary? And not just the scene as a whole. I'm talking about really when Luke gets attacked. He gets pulled down into the water, he pops up, gets pulled down again, then he just pops up and says it let go of him and disappeared. And it never gets mentioned ever again. What about Episode 5? Did R2-D2 really need to be eaten by that alligator thing we didn't really get a good look at and get spit out across the way and spit shit out of its mouth or whatever that thing is? Did C-3PO really need to get shot into pieces? And when he's being put back together, did we really need to see that, considering we already knew the Imperials were on the base? And why would Chewbacca put his head on wrong? What was the point of that? Especially in the next scene, his head's on the right way, so what was the point? And in Episode 6, did the Ewoks really need to capture Han, Luke, and Chewbacca and prepare them for a feast? How are these Ewoks going to eat 2 grown men and a Wookiee? And why would they think C-3PO is a god, considering Chewbacca is an 8-foot version of them using technology they've never seen before? Would he be considered a god? What was the point of this anyway? Especially since they welcomed them to the tribe just a few minutes later. And that leads me to my next point. The characters are so much better in the prequels. Luke, Han, and Leia are really flawed and flimsy characters. Luke Skywalker is hilarious because I've heard people say Anakin Skywalker was whiny. Every line from, "doesn't look like we have much of a choice, but I'll remind him," to "blasted pigs, where are you?" All Luke does is bitch and moan. Every fucking line. So how is it Anakin's whiny when Luke is 12 times more grating than Anakin ever was? And then in Episode 5, he sees this strange old hermit appear before him, telling him to go to Dagobah, which after a battle he commanded to a loss, he does. And there, he meets Yoda and fails every single test. He then shows up in Episode 6, dressed like a priest, minus the white collar, calling himself a Jedi Knight. this is the guy you want to save the galaxy, especially since he didn't even do that. Darth Vader died because he sacrificed himself destroying Darth Sidious. Luke didn't do anything but cry for him to help him. So really, how is Luke the hero and the center of the universe? Even Louis from The Simpsons called him out and said he didn't finish Jedi school. How is this the guy that you aspire to be? Really? Not Anakin, him. Han is an interesting character since so many people have gone over and over his extensive transition in the original series. How? From a guy that does things for selfish reasons to a guy that does things for different selfish reasons? He's only there because he's getting paid, and he's only there in episode 5 because he seems to be stuck, but he's still trying to bail out paying off Jabba the Hutt. And then in episode 6, when his friends save him and kill Jabba the Hutt, he kind of just stays because I guess Jabba's dead. Now that brings up Lando, by the way. What made him such a great character? He sold out the rebels to the Imperials, then because the deal went sort of south, he decided to turn on the Imperials, and he tries to help Han, but Han has to help him, and then he becomes a general? And what about Leia? Oh God, help me in heaven, I don't understand what the draw to this useless character is. Considering her only memorable line is "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, your only hope," there is no reason why anyone should have anything to do with this character, as she's the consummate damsel in distress. The entire plot of episode 4 is to save Princess Leia from the Death Star, then to save her and Yavin from the Death Star blowing her up. In episode 5, Han has to save her from the Imperials, just so Lando has to save her from the Imperials again. In episode 6, the whole plot is for her to get captured by Jabba the Hutt, so that R2-D2 has to save her from Jabba the Hutt. Just so in Endor, she has to get saved by an Ewok from the Imperials, just so the Ewoks can save her again when she gets captured by the Imperials. Just so she can get shot down and saved one more time by Chewbacca and the AT-ST. Whatever the case, whether or not she can actually shoot a gun well, she's really helpless. In contrast, Anakin Skywalker is an awesome character. He gets the job done. Even as a 9-year-old, he's saving people, and that's all he really wanted to do. Granted, he made a bad choice, but the bad choice was because he had so much pressure on himself fulfilling this chosen one moniker, and some people saying that he was whiny, I saw him more as angry or conflicted. I never saw him really whiny, maybe a couple of times he complained, but in some scenes, he was really fucking frightening. And Padme is an awesome character. I absolutely love the character herself because she's a tough bitch. When she was the queen and they were keeping her away, she said, "Fuck you, I'm going back to my planet," and with a bunch of security guards, we're taking it back. And it was her plan that won that day. Gotta love the decoy thing. That was great. In episode 2, once again, they're trying to protect her. At that time, she follows Anakin Skywalker against his orders, then tells him we're going against orders to save Obi-Wan Kenobi. They get captured, but she saves herself, and then goes back to the hangar to help Anakin Skywalker in peril. In episode 3, pregnant with 2 kids, that woman goes running out to a volcanic planet to beg for Anakin Skywalker to return despite everything he's done back home with her so they can run off and forget all the problems he's caused. And when he attempts to kill her, she asks whether or not he's alright. Now that's a woman. And the reason this makes sense is because the romance in the prequels was evolved so much more thoroughly and better than the romance in the original series. You can tell that these two were madly in love with each other. Whether or not you like the dialogue that Anakin Skywalker was spouting out, she was pretty good in some of the responses that she came up with. And when it was her turn to turn, she did it pretty well. The two of them have their time together, and it's a romance that buds and explodes into what it is. Which then leads me to this issue. The fact that everyone complains about Anakin in the Vader suit saying no. Considering he did all this for her, what do you expect him to say? "Motherfucker, this hurts," or "Yo, boss, got a sandwich?" What is he going to talk about other than Padme? And besides, it was brilliant to see how we connected Anakin Skywalker to Darth Vader. So let me get this straight. Anakin Skywalker, who sacrifices everything and gives up on everything that made him who he is, his ideologies and everything, for a specific woman, finds out that woman has been killed by his own hand, and his response... ruins his character. But Luke Skywalker finds out his father is not only alive, but second in command of the entire universe. His response is... And that's perfectly fine. That romance is so much better than that flimsy shit between Han and Leia. Where did this romance come from? They look like they want nothing to do with each other. He winks at her and she just kind of shies away. During an award ceremony he was reluctant to receive anyway. And then in episode 5, he just starts making it out like she's madly in love with him. I don't understand where that came from, especially considering she would rather make out with her own brother than hang out with Han Solo. They get lost in space together. They talk about dirty hands and scoundrels. Next thing you know, they're kissing, and then she's in love with him. And then in episode 6, just to really finish it off, he's even ready to concede Leia to Luke until he finds out that Luke's her brother. That seems kind of shaky, but people will then argue about plot holes. And they talk about the episode 2 plot hole directly, saying how Sifo-Dyas was never really discovered. The problem with that is Sifo-Dyas was not the main plot. The main plot was that Dooku was a Sith Lord for 10 years and infiltrated the Jedi databanks to pursue Obi-Wan Kenobi to find this cloning planet where he found these clones that were supposed to be for the Republic, in which case he then followed the guy they were cloning, Jango Fett, to the droid foundries in Geonosis, which started the Civil War. Considering Jango Fett put it to bed by saying Sifo-Dyas was somebody he never heard of, he was hired by a man named Tyrannus, and in the end of episode 2, Sidious refers to Count Dooku as Tyrannus. That pretty much explained to you exactly what that plot was about. If you want to talk about a plot hole, what about the plot hole in Empire Strikes Back? Now this was something that always bothered me, and it never really gets explained. Originally, the one problem that I have is we've been hearing Darth Vader is obsessed with finding Luke Skywalker, yet after the battle with the AT-AT and AT-ST walkers and the snow speeders, Darth Vader is planetside with Luke Skywalker and he's chasing after Han and Leia in the base. Since he can sense Luke in the cockpit of an X-Wing over the Death Star, why can't he sense where Luke is when they're right on the same planet? In fact, the rebels with Luke are just kind of chilling after this battle like nothing ever happened. When it comes to Han and Leia being chased by Darth Vader, the funny thing is this. I know for a fact that Boba Fett's Slave One travels faster in hyperspace than the Millennium Falcon because I'm a Star Wars fan and I know stupid shit like that. However, they still have to chase down the Millennium Falcon to know that they're going to Bespin. Unless he's listening in on their conversations, which was never pointed out before, he has to chase them down to Bespin. Now, not only does Boba Fett get to Bespin before they do, but apparently the entire Imperial fleet, including Darth Vader's massive Star Destroyer, gets to Bespin, contacts Lando Calrissian, hides their ships really well, and makes a deal before the Millennium Falcon gets there. How do you explain that? Considering the Millennium Falcon was the ship that made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs, how does a giant fleet of Imperials have enough time to get contacted by Boba Fett as to where the Millennium Falcon will be, show up there first, hide all their ships to avoid any suspicion, settle in, and strike a deal with Lando before the Millennium Falcon got there? But it's hard to consider people paying attention to this. They still don't understand midichlorians. The midichlorians are a metaphysical explanation in a science fiction movie as to how exactly people are strong with the Force and others aren't. They're microscopic organisms within living cells that the Force channels itself through. The Force is still an all-powerful mystical force, it just physically channels itself through the midichlorians in cells. This again makes it more physical than magical. It explains how Anakin was more capable in the Force than even Master Yoda. And it explains why an intelligent being like Padme Amidala would not be connected to the Force, whereas a lesser intelligent being could be like, say, Jar Jar Binks. Oh Lord, I've evoked the name. I'm sorry, I know people have told me that this character ruins the movies. I really can't see why. Considering the character speaks for about 40 minutes in 6 hours of film, I don't see how he could ruin the movies. I get it. It was childish. I get it. There was slapstick, like there was no slapstick in the original series. How did Boba Fett get killed by Han Solo, if he got killed at all? It's so amazing to me how this one character can still get crushed as though he's a one-note, goofy, bumbling jackass. Jar Jar Binks had moments of serenity and actually questioned Jedi Knights reliance on the Force, and managed to get the Nabooians and the Gungans together by questioning the Queen's opinions of the Gungans themselves and prejudice. Jar Jar Binks had toned it down a lot throughout episode 1, and it's a shame that George Lucas had more plans for him, but the fans wouldn't allow it because they were so jaded by this one character being so annoying. When I can count on my hand how many times he really annoyed me, if he even did. And by the way, this is the same series that has characters like Salicious Crub and Nieb Nub. But who am I kidding? Nobody wants to watch a movie where a character succeeds despite bumbling stupidity. But I guess it's because George Lucas doesn't know how to direct anymore, which is why there were so many bad acting performances. I don't understand what acting performances we're talking about here. The minor characters, the non-humans, I thought they were all fun. I thought a lot of them were really awesome too. I didn't see any problem with the acting performances. Was Shmi Skywalker's 10 minutes of dialogue really that grating? Samuel L. Jackson, for instance, I had no problem with him. I wanted to see him with a lightsaber. He didn't disappoint, and I thought he was really good. I thought he harkened back to his role in Unbreakable, which is one of the few M. Night Shyamalan movies people actually like. And what was wrong with Liam Neeson? I had no problem with him. He did a good job as a Jedi Knight. I liked his chemistry with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. And what about Ewan McGregor? Here's a guy that was barely noteworthy, if noteworthy at all, taking over a role that was originally established by Alec Guinness. Sir Alec Guinness now has been replaced by Ewan McGregor. And how about Frank Oz's Yoda? What, he did a bad job? I loved seeing Yoda get more screen time. It was great. And I especially loved him with a lightsaber. I always said when I saw the puppet back in episodes 5 and 6, man, I wish I could see him with a lightsaber. Well, now we did. It doesn't ruin his character. He's the master of the light side. After all, he said that the Force is his ally, and a powerful ally it is. It makes a crippled little old Muppet do flips and crazy shit with a lightsaber. And what about Tamira Morrison playing Jango Fett and a bunch of other clones? What's the problem that the guy has a New Zealand accent? It just shows that there's a wide galaxy out there and not everybody's either English or from California. And what about Ian McDiarmid? Holy motherfucking Christ, Ian McDiarmid was amazing. To go from a slithery, conniving, manipulative little shit that turned everybody in his favor by simply speaking to an over-the-top Japanese role-playing game villain, Ian McDiarmid was spectacular. Originally in episode 6, he annoyed the shit out of me. But when I saw him in these movies, I was his biggest fan. When people complain about the acting, what they're really referring to are 3 people: Jake Lloyd, Hayden Christensen, and Natalie Portman. When it comes to Jake Lloyd, to be fair, I would have picked somebody more ahead of their time, somebody that looks a little older than 9 years old, even though they are 9 years old. I can understand where they're going with it. You're supposed to forget that this kid becomes Darth Vader. And this is the best Jake Lloyd you're going to see. And Hayden Christensen, I've heard the complaints, and I can't argue with a lot of them. He is very monotone. But then again, it might be a new age male Canadian acting thing, because Ryan Gosling hasn't shown any emotion, and that guy's got an Academy Award. There was so much more he should have gotten out of that character, but even so, he does show emotion on his face. He emotes well. It's his delivery that makes it sound whiny. It's not really whiny, but even so, I would have considered Anakin Skywalker to be more like a Heracles, as opposed to a pop star. Who they should have picked for Anakin Skywalker should have been Chris Hemsworth. He looks like a fucking comic book character. In fact, he's playing a comic book character derived from a mythological god. He's got a deep, booming voice. He's a really good actor. And most of all, he gets so much out of Natalie Portman. But really, when it comes down to it, the prequels and the re-releases were doomed from the start. When you break it down, they're not remaking episodes 4 and 5. Not 6, because real Star Wars fans don't like 6. They only like 2 of the 6 movies, but we won't get into that. These movies were doing something new. They were innovative. They made you think. And they showed you a shit ton of magnificently artistic battle scenes and such, which people didn't want. The so-called real fans were either remembering the days when they were children or remembering vicariously the days of the people that watched them originally when they were children, speaking to them about it. They were not watching a movie that they wanted to see because they didn't really care how it all started. The only thing they wanted to see was Anakin Skywalker wiping out all the Jedi and being a badass. But that wasn't the story. George Lucas himself said everybody wanted to see episodes 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3. But that wasn't the story. This was the story. And it doesn't betray anything we knew. Anakin was a good man that made a bad decision and turned to the dark side, betraying himself and who he originally was. We saw how he helped the Empire hunt down and destroy the Jedi Knights, not destroy the Jedi Knights, and we knew that Obi-Wan Kenobi and him were going to fight, and then it was going to lead to him becoming what he became, but we just didn't know it was going to happen that way. Yeah, it's probably going to leave a mark. We also knew exactly why Yoda said to not underestimate the powers of the Emperor, especially since they fought, and they fought to a standstill. Maybe people misunderstood, or maybe people weren't paying attention. Whatever the case, these were the movies that George Lucas always wanted to make. These were the movies that he always wanted to put together with the technology he always wished he could have. And considering he wrote and directed these, like he wrote and directed Episode 4, it's hard to imagine that the original creator's vision is not part of the actual series or does not lend itself to the actual series. It expanded on everything that we originally knew and changed our ideas of things that we thought we knew. And the re-releases were put together so that it could connect these a lot more seamlessly as opposed to the original vision. He himself said he wanted to finish what he thought was an unfinished product in the original series, which people went off on for reasons like CGI eyelids and giving James Earl Jones voiceover credit when it wasn't there before. But seeing as how all these complaints could be attributed to you didn't pay attention or you're too busy sticking yourself in the original series, it's hard to imagine why people would like the prequels. They are different and they are not exactly what you thought they would be. But the minor complaints and dissecting of these movies and the re-releases makes it almost impossible to enjoy these movies. And that's the problem. There are people that like these movies. There are people like me who showed up late to the original series that saw these as improvements because they were. How these movies can be crushed when they're cut from the same cloth as the original movies, only with certain aspects done better, is beyond me. If you go back and watch the original series, you'll notice that there are a shit ton of issues and flaws that never get mentioned. Why is it these movies get killed and not the original series for doing the same things, just not as well? They don't establish anything really. They don't have good main characters. They might have great actors portraying them, but the main characters are not that good. And so many aspects of them are so drab and boring. But again, you're not going to convince anybody. You're not going to change anyone's minds. I wanted the truth to be known, but people are going to lash out and argue and complain that they're not the original movies. And that's the only complaint. However, if you only wanted to see the original movies, then you're not a real Star Wars fan. If you can't appreciate the original vision of the original creator, then you're probably not a fan. And considering nobody liked anything George Lucas did since 1983, more or less, it's hard to imagine that they like Star Wars as opposed to just elements of Star Wars that they were certain were true. Overall, the so-called real Star Wars fans spoke loud and often, and Disney heard their cries, and they decided to make their version of Star Wars. But I'll dissect that steaming pile of shit later. I thank you all for watching. I have more for you soon to come, so stay tuned, take care, and have a great day.